podcast for week 8. I'm your host, Josh Shepardson, and you can follow me on Twitter, where I post this at BChat50. And we're going to discuss a buy low, sell high article on fantasyfootballcafe.com. And let's jump right into the buy low target at running back that I highlighted, and that's David Cobb. David Cobb is a rookie who has yet to take an NFL snap. He's been on the PUP list, he's been on injured reserve with a designation to return. And he was drafted with the expectation that he would be a key piece in that Titans backfield, a Titans backfield that has really been a mess this year. Bishop Sankey continues to disappoint and only played 2 offensive snaps last week. And Antonio Andrews has been the feature-ish back, we'll say the primary ball carrier, since he's also sharing a lot of time with Dexter McCluster, who's gotten the bulk of the snaps at running back recently. It is a messy situation, but Cobb, the beauty of that is that when Cobb returns, he's going to have a chance to immediately gain a prominent role in that backfield. The team didn't spend a mid-round pick on him, a 4th-round pick on him, just to kind of let him rot on the bench, at least in all likelihood, unless there's some huge disconnect between the front office and Ken Wisenhunt. But Cobb isn't a burner by any stretch. He doesn't need to be. He's a big back. He's 5'11", 229 pounds, and he's a very productive college runner at Minnesota. He's a big back that you would expect to get the bulk of the goal line carries when he gets back. He's first eligible to be activated from injured reserve for the Week 9 contest against the Saints. That would be a good game for him to come back for, because the Saints are giving to running backs. Of course, if you do own him, I would not advocate immediately starting him until we see what kind of snap counts he's going to get. He's going to have some rust to shake off, probably going to have to build up his playing time. But this is an investment that you might be able to grab off of the wire at this point, but I am seeing him stashed in some of the leagues that I'm in. It means that there are some forward-thinking owners out there that are already on board with stashing Cobb for late in the season. And in those cases, and the leagues where he is rostered, I think he's a good target as a throw-in. Most likely, if people are stashing him, they had a bench spot to work with. They have a need at running back. Maybe you can, if you've got some running back depth, that would be the owner to deal with, maybe get an upgrade at receiver while scooping Cobb as a stash candidate for late in the season. You're not expecting to get immediate results from Cobb, but if you're in good fantasy standing at this point, getting an asset that could have value come playoff time or during the playoff push is extremely valuable, and Cobb is just that. I do think that with the backfield and flux the way that it is, Cobb has a very clear path to playing time. All he has to do is go out and perform, and if he performs at all, he's going to be an upgrade over what they have already. So he is the first buy low target that I'm looking at. The next one is a guy who has also started the year hurt, was on the PUP list, not the IR with the injury designation to return, and that's why he was able to return last week, and that's receiver Brandon LaFell. Excuse me. Brandon LaFell had a career year in year 1 with the New England Patriots last season. He and Brady were in lock and step last year, and they both played very well together. And LaFell, there were some questions whether he would be activated for last week's game. He ended up being activated, and he was rusty. He caught 2 passes, was targeted 8 times. Unfortunately, the 2 passes 2 of his 8 targets were reeled in for catches. The other 6 passes, while they hit his hands, he didn't reel them in for catches. 6 drops. It's an ugly line. I'm sure there are probably some owners out there that are already concerned about LaFell's playing time going forward, since Bill Belichick has benched players who fumbled the football. He doesn't take well to guys not performing and making football plays, just doing the things that you need to do, reeling in passes, protecting the football. I think LaFell's going to obviously get a pass. I mean, he's returning from injury, and he's had no game action before this, so he's got some rust to shake off. And like Cobb, I think he's a guy that you invest in now, not to immediately get in your lineup, but to get in your lineup down the stretch. And with the Patriots passing offense operating the way that it is, with Brady playing at as high of a level as he is, he's a guy who has some upside down the stretch. And Yes, there are some other guys who need feeding in this pass offense: Rob Gronkowski, Julian Edelman, even Dion Lewis. It almost doesn't matter because they don't run the ball a ton. They air the ball out a lot, and you can't guard all of these pass catchers. And LaFell, I think, is going to be the guy that teams just can't take away. I mean, the teams are going to be focused on taking away Gronk. They're going to try to take away Edelman. And then that leaves Brandon LaFell, who's a pretty darn good receiver, and as a big receiver, is a red zone nightmare, to do some damage. And he did that damage last year. So he's a guy that played like a fringe wide receiver 2 last year. I think his upside's a little bit lower than that, but I do like LaFell this year. Even with all the pass catching options in the offense, he played in an offense with a lot of pass catching options last year. The team featured the same Edelman, the same Gronk, and no, they didn't have Dion Lewis, but they had arguably a better pass catching back in Shane Vereen, and Brandon LaFell still got his. So I like LaFell down the stretch. Brady's playing at an even higher level this year than he was last year, so he's got to go out and trade for. If he's still on your wires, go out and grab him and scoop him up and stash him. If somebody got a little angry with his performance and cut bait after stashing him, go out and grab him. LaFell is worth rostering in leagues of 12 teams or larger, all scoring types, standard or PPR leagues. Moving on to the sell high, look at Amari Cooper, and this is truly a case of where I'm advocating selling high. This isn't just looking to cash out and break even. This isn't looking to just move a guy. Cooper's coming off some big games to start the season. He's already got 3 games of 100-plus yards receiving. He's played really well, 33 receptions, 3 touchdowns, and 519 yards receiving, which is the 19th highest receiving yardage total in the league. He's exceeded most reasonable expectations. Rookie receivers aren't supposed to perform this well. Obviously, last year's class kind of set the bar quite high, reinvented what maybe we think of receivers coming into the league immediately. But the reason I'm advocating moving Cooper is a tough schedule down the stretch. The Raiders do play the Chiefs twice, which the Chiefs are the most giving defense to wide receivers from a fantasy scoring perspective. Unfortunately, one of those matchups is in Week 17, and in most fantasy leagues, Week 17 is not used in the schedule because of the risk of players sitting, and for the most part, it's eliminated, and for good reason. And that means that he only has 1 showdown against the Chiefs, which is obviously a plus, but they only played 2 games against teams ranking in the bottom 10 defenses in fantasy scoring allowed to receivers the rest of the way. They play 4 teams that rank as the top 10 stingiest defenses and points scoring allowed to wide receivers the rest of the way. And the other games where they don't play the top 10 defenses, they play the 11th, 12th, and 13th stingiest defenses against wide receivers for fantasy scoring. That is really going to be a tough road to hoe for him. I love Cooper as a player. I think that the matchups are just very tough. And if you're in a league where the owners aren't maybe as astute, they aren't looking ahead at the schedule, they're just looking at the production, you should be able to get excess value for Amari Cooper and cash out at basically his peak selling time, because while he's likely to have some good games here down the stretch, he definitely has the deck stacked against him, and he's going to have some clunkers thrown in there for sure with this type of tough schedule down the stretch. The final sell high player that I'm going to feature is Jordan Reed. And I mean, Reed is a fantastic tight end when healthy, and that's a big key. This is Reed's 3rd season as a pro. He played in 9 games as a rookie. He played 11 games last year. He's missed time this year. The guy can't stay healthy. He's got multiple concussions on his resume, which is alarming. I mean, 1 wrong hit and he could be gone for weeks. This is not the type of situation that it's tough rostering guys who are frequently hurt. Reed is just that. He's a tease when he's out there. He is very good. But injury aside, he's got a tough schedule the rest of the way as well. He's got games against the Eagles, Cowboys, Bears, Patriots, and Panthers, who all rank within the top 10 defending tight ends from a fantasy scoring perspective. And he only has a couple of matchups that stand out as soft. Those are against the Saints and the Giants. So The number of very tough games definitely outweigh the soft matchups the rest of the way. And I just don't see enough here to feel good about holding him. You're not going to get a higher watermark to sell than after this past week's game where he exploded. He looked great. And if you can move him to a tight end needy team, that is definitely something that I would advocate. And most likely, if you're a Jordan Reed owner, it means you've got another tight end on your roster because he did miss time this year. So you've got somebody that you can plug and play. I would cash out on Reed at this point. You're not going to get a better selling point than now. So move him, see what you can get for him. I mean, it should be pretty easy to sell a guy who caught 11 passes for 72 yards and a pair of touchdowns last week. If ever there were a time to get out from under that risk of Reed and from his tough schedule, it would be now. And this week I'm going to bring an interesting wrinkle to the podcast. I brought it to the article, and that's a buy high candidate. Usually we go with a player to keep an eye on, but there was a player that I just really wanted to write about to acquire in leagues, to target in leagues, and that's Jonathan Stewart. He's coming off of 2 very good games, and obviously his owners aren't going to be looking to give him away, but given Jonathan Stewart's injury history, given the fact that he's put up modest numbers sharing the backfield with D'Angelo Williams in recent seasons, and the fact that there are touchdown vultures in the form of Cam Newton and Mike Tolbert in Carolina, you might have some owners that are looking to move that risk, that perceived risk with Jonathan Stewart, and a few owners that might be patting themselves on the back if they can deal him for something that they feel is of value. I'm going to take the opposite side of things and say, yes, I recognize that there are touchdown vultures in Carolina, and that certainly caps Stewart's upside, but he's got a great schedule down the stretch. He should carry the ball 20-plus times most games down the stretch as well. The Panthers just do not have viable pass catchers beyond Greg Olsen. Ted Ginn Jr. is the number 1 there as in terms of receivers. He's a big play threat, I'll give him that, but he's not a true number 1. He's probably not even a true number 2. He's a number 3 being pressed in a number 1 duty because of Calvin Benjamin's season-ending injury in the preseason. And that puts a heavy reliance on the running game. They're willing to give Jonathan Stewart the football. He has been given the football a lot, and I love his schedule. The biggest thing that stands out to me, especially if you're a team that projects to be in the playoffs already, he has a Week 14 matchup, which is oftentimes the first week of the fantasy playoffs, against the Falcons. And the Falcons have allowed the 4th most fantasy points per game to opposing running backs. Well, guess what? He gets them again in what is oftentimes the Super Bowl week of fantasy football, Week 16. So that is 2 awesome matchups with the Falcons in games where you would expect the Panthers are obviously going to be playing for something. It's a division rival. They might be playing for the division at that point, but in games where they're going to want to control the clock, they're going to want to control the ball, they're going to want to keep Julio Jones, Matt Ryan, and Devonta Freeman off the field, and that means a heavy dose of Jonathan Stewart in those weeks. So those are plus matchups, but that's not it. They also face the 5th most giving defense to opposing running backs in the Colts, the 10th most giving defense in the Saints, and the 11th most giving defense in the Giants. So that's 5+ matchups down the road, and even their tough matchups, 2 of their tougher matchups, are not as tough as they appear. He faces the Packers and Titans. The Packers have allowed 4.7 yards per carry, and the only reason that their fantasy points allowed per game to running backs doesn't rank worse than it does is because they haven't given up many touchdowns. So they are giving up a lot of yardage. Again, that's going to be a game where you would expect the Panthers to try and control the clock, control the ball, keep the ball out of Aaron Rodgers' hands, and that's going to mean a heavy dose to Jonathan Stewart. The other game against the Titans, again, the Titans are not allowing a ton of fantasy scoring to running backs, but they're giving up 4.6 yards per carry, and that is not a good total. That's one of the worst in the league. So Stewart has an incredibly soft schedule shaping up here. So he's a guy that I would pony up for right now. I would imagine that his owners are going to be inclined to listen to a deal because, one, they won't feel like they're dealing him at a bad point. They'll feel like they have a chance to get max value for him. Make a fair offer and go out and get Jonathan Stewart because the upside is fairly immense down the stretch, even with the presence of some goal line vultures. Stewart's going to get a ton of yardage and a ton of touches, and he can spring a few long touchdown runs to make up for the fact that maybe he's not going to get that work close to the goal line when the Panthers can go to Cam Newton keeping it, or their big back and Mike Tolbert. And on that note, that's going to wrap things up. Check out the other articles at fantasyfootballcafe.com and definitely hop on the forums, chat it up with some other fantasy football nuts like yourself. With that, I'm checking out. Check back next week, and good luck this week.